Hello everyone, I'm Marco, or if you want the grammar, and welcome to my first lesson of Glossopoiesi. Today we'll speak about linguistics and languages and about how this can be useful to us when we invent a new language. In the first video I introduced the main subject of the channel, conlangic or Glossopoiesi. We can't do this without speaking about linguistics. Linguistics is the discipline that studies languages with the aim to comprehend the human ability of the language. A language is a structured system of communication. Language, in a broader sense, is the method of communication that involves the use of particularly human languages. This one is the definition of a language in English Wikipedia. In the Italian version, it can be translated as the set of sounds, gestures, and movements, and I could add also the set of intonations by which the communication process is activated. According to the anthropologist Ian Tattersall, language appeared 100,000 years ago, although the necessary anatomical features of the throat was already present. There are two theories about the origin of the language. The first one that defines language as an innate ability, and the second one like a learned ability. We can't know if modern languages derive from a unique former language. The proto-human language, also proto-sapiens, a proto-word as the hypothetical direct genetic predecessor of all the world's languages, or if they derive from different linguistic primordial stocks. In support of the theory of the social origin of language, there was the resounding case of the white boy discovered in 1828 in France, Victor of Avere. Despite all the efforts of the team of psychologists Jean-Marc Gasparitard, the boy of Aveyron was unable to articulate anything but a few words. The experts concluded that in the training of intelligence and language, socialization and interaction with the environment are fundamental since the first days of life. According to biblical tradition, precisely in the book of Genesis, God created Adam, and whatever name he gave to any living thing, that was its name. Instead, according to the Hindu tradition, Saraswati, the Brahma's wife, gave to humanity the gift of speaking. The historian Herodotus wrote about the story of the pharaoh Psammetichus, who tried an experiment on two babies 2,500 years ago. The two children were reported to have uttered bakos, which is Phrygian for breath. So Psammetichus admitted that the Phrygians were a nation older than the Egyptian. Phrygian was a language spoken in a region on the modern Turkey. Also, the King James IV of Scotland ordered a similar experiment in the 16th century. It is said that the children began to speak Hebrew spontaneously, confirming the king's conviction that Hebrew was really the language of the Garden of Eden. About a century later, even the Mughal Emperor Akbar ordered some children to be raised in silence and found that they produced no sound whatsoever. A quite different conception of the birth of human language is based on the notion of natural sounds, sounds that come from the outside world. The auditory system develops before birth. This early perceptual ability developing produces the ability to identify sounds in the environment and allows humans to connect a sound and the object that produces that sound. According to Jespersen bow-wow theory, primitive words were derived from the imitation of natural sounds. Bow-wow theories suggest that the first human languages developed as onomatopoeia, imitation of natural sounds. The name bow-wow theory was coined by Max Müller, a philologist who was critical of the notion. The bow-wow theory is largely discredited as an account of the origin of language, though some contemporary theories suggest that general imitative abilities may have played an important role in the evolution of language. Poo-poo theory instead suggests that language may be derived from instinctive sounds that we emit in particular circumstances. The human brain is lateralized with specialized function in each of the two hemispheres. The sections of the brain that control movements involved with the complex vocalization and the section that control the manipulation of objects are very close in the left hemisphere. It is possible that there is an evolutionary connection between the ability to use tools and the language ability, and that both are related to development of the talking brain. To make an analogy with the most basic processes involved with the manufacture of tools, we can say that it's not enough to be able to catch a stone. Human has to contact another stone to produce a tool. Human being could have developed the ability to identify an object by emitting a specific sound, then could have added sounds to make a complex message. At birth, the baby's brain has only a quarter of its final weight and the larynx is much upper in the neck. This allows to babies and chimpanzees to breathe and drink at the same time. The larynx descends, the brain develops, the child assumes an erect position and begins to walk and talk, and the children born deaf can learn sign language from a very early age. With the study of human evolution, some genetic mutations related to dietary changes have been identified, in particular linked to an increase in calorie intake, perhaps due to the ability to digest starches, and a strong increase in glucose production. In order to solve the enigma of the language origin, innatism hypothesis could suggest one or two genetic mutations. A language is made of sentences that are sequences or symbols of a specific set. This set of symbols is called alphabet. If we give an alphabet to a language, this will be its product, but not the only one. This happens because not all sentences formed with this alphabet are sentences of the same language. Let's take Italian and English as examples. Both are based on the same alphabet, but both consist of different sets of phrases. Grammar is a formalism that allows us to define the composition rules of sentences of a specific language. Grammar is therefore a meta-language, a language to define languages. Let's go back now to the topic of the day, then to language and linguistics. A language in linguistics is a system of spoken or marked communication proper to human community. It indicates, therefore, a concrete form of human language faculty specific to a certain community. We speak of the single languages, Italian or English, for example, as specific manifestation of the language. Linguistics is the discipline that studies languages in order to understand the human ability of language. Ferdinand de Saussure was the first scholar to endow linguistics with the empirical methods of objectivity of signs. Thanks to his theories known as structuralism, we can say that he was the founding father of modern linguistics. Let's begin by saying that the existing languages in the world today, outcome of a historical development in a given area of the planet, are called natural historical languages. Historical because they have a history of which the speakers of such languages are protagonists. Natural to oppose them to the artificial ones. In recent years, studies on language, understood as a human faculty to communicate through verbal systems, and language, concrete manifestation with which the verbal potential of an individual or group is realized in a certain historical, geographical, social context, have multiplied. Scholars with very different scientific interests have examined the problem of language from different points of view. For linguistics, it can be said that communication exists whenever there is a transfer of information from a signified to a signifier in such a way that the message as conceived coincides with the information encoded by the receiver. Humans are not the only ones using conventional signals. In the animal world, there are forms of information exchange, but there are not forms of verbal thought in which words and action interact with each other. Language is the refined instrument of symbolic representation of those capacities which are the base of all conceptual functions. It is also the cheapest way that an individual has at his disposal to participate in the life of his community, becoming an active member. From the moment of its appearance and with its evolution, language has become the highest logical organizer of experience and thought. The interest in language, human specificity, began in antiquity, both with the early grammarians, Plato, Aristotle, or even Saint Augustine, but linguistics as science is quite recent. Its birth, as we have already said, can be set at the beginning of the 20th century with Ferdinand de Saussure, with the posthumous publication of his lectures held in Geneva between 1906 and 1911 in the general linguistics course. The work of Saussure has the merit of having defined the linguistic sign as the union of a signifier and a signified. With the word signifier is meant the verbal production of that set of sounds which have the property for those who speak that language of carrying a certain meaning. Our whole life is communication. We communicate from the first moment after birth until death. From morning to evening, we communicate to request or provide information through words, gestures, and in many other ways. Communication is not only between people, but also between objects and people and between animals. There are many forms of communication. On the road, we stop a man to ask him for information. At the restaurant, we order a pizza to the waiter. On the phone, we send an audio message to a friend to invite him to dinner. A baby cries to communicate his stomachache to his mother. The clothes worn by a person inform us that he comes from India or Scotland, for example. A cloudy black sky tells us that it is likely to rain. A message appears in every communication process. Typically, the message starts from a transmitter and arrives at a receiver. The message may consist of words said by the sender at the presence of the receiver. It can be sent remotely, as it can be an audio message, a phone call, or a video call. The message can consist of gestures, as we said before, the cry of the baby, or as we will see, also the language of signs. A message can also be unintentional. All messages are expressed in a language. We have said that communication does not only happen with words, it can also happen with facial expressions, with clothes or other information that we can find in nature as a cloudy or starry sky. Languages by which communication is done are formed by codes. A code is a system of signs that relates a form or expression to a content. The form of the sign is called signifier, its content signified. While the signifier is something concrete that we can see, touch or feel, the signified is something abstract that we can find in our minds. Traffic light is the best example to explain these concepts. The color is the concrete part, the visible one. In this case, it's the signifier. The color is the ideological part that is connected to the idea, to the concept, to the convention. The red light means to stop. The green light corresponds to the possibility to proceed, and the yellow light provides to be careful and invites to slow down in order to stop to the red light that will shoot shortly. Codes are practically unlimited. A code is the set of facial expressions that indicate different feelings. The Arabic or the Roman or the Chinese numbering system, the way of dressing that gives social, cultural, and economic information, the set of signs to diagnose diseases, and all verbal languages like Italian, French, or English. The operation of forming a message using a code is called encoding. During the encoding operation, there is a form, signifier, with which express that information, signified, effectively. The message is usually sent from a issuer to a receiver. A child, for example, can send to another child the message "I'm happy" using the language code. A dog, which is not able to use the language code in order to communicate the same content, its happiness, uses the code of body movements by waving its tail. The sender transmits his message. The receiver receives it and interprets it or gives it a meaning, identifying its content. This operation of interpreting the message according to the chosen code is called decoding. If someone obviously speaks to us in Chinese, we don't have the interpretation key to decode his message. During the communication operation, the passage of the information happens without problems only when the sender and the receiver perform the coding operations and those of decoding the message using the same code. In everyday reality, it can happen that the code through which the message is encoded and the one through which it is decoded are different. Codes can vary with situations, that is, with different contexts. This means that the same expression can have a different meaning, for example, in different places. If we return to the example of the traffic light, it may happen that in places different from Italy, the system of meanings is different. The Italian tourist could be initially surprised when, in some states of USA, he sees that the motorists, in the case in which the color of the traffic light is red, they stop at the first, then check that the intersection is free, and then proceed turning to the right even in the presence of the policeman. The code consists of an expression, signifier, that includes many elements. Only some of them serve to communicate. Consider the pink or the blue ball that indicates the birth of a girl or a boy. The size of this ball has no meaning. This item is not relevant and does not indicate, for example, that the baby was born lean or fat. The relevant traits of this code are only the pink or the blue color of the ball. In a code we call relevant traits those elements that give information and that establish distinctions. I hope you will like this video. Sorry for my mistakes. I swear that English mistakes won't be present in next videos. From the 5th lesson I will take English sources, so be patient please.